Velkommen til en ny episode av Rusrevyen. Dette enda en episode som kommer til å bli på engelsk, og det kommer norsk teksting som du kan se i videoen her på Spotify eller på YouTube eller andre steder hvor du kan se videoversjonen av denne podcasten. Okay, welcome to this episode. Neil Woods, from the UK. You just arrived here yesterday, actually, even though it was supposed to be the day before due to major flight issues. Traveled everywhere in order to get here. Yeah. So welcome.
Thank you.
We invited you here to do a lecture and also partake in a panel discussion that we did yesterday at Litteraturhuset together with Greenpeace and the Rainforest Foundation, also the Green Party and yourself. And I think that was a success. Thank you so much for doing that, and thank you so much for joining this podcast today.
No, thank you, because you organised it, and it really is quite an achievement to have got those people together in the way that you did. It was a great crowd, the fact that you got it recorded as well, so people will be able to watch it as well, right?
Yeah, they will. So we're going to post that, and also today in this podcast we're going to delve into some of the exact same topics, because what you've been putting a lot of effort to together with a huge coalition of other people the last few years has been to put attention towards the combination of drug policy and climate justice, not as silos, but as one and the same thing.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, I can tell you how that began, if you like.
Sure.
So I'm a former undercover police officer, for those people watching that don't know. So I spent a long time infiltrating drug dealing gangs in the UK. I did that for a long time, over the space of 13 years, between 93 and 2007. And when I was doing it, I really believed in it. And I was very slow in realising that I was only causing harm, but I got there eventually. So I've been a drug policy activist now for a long time, since 2013. And I've spoke a lot, obviously, about the impact of drug prohibition on drug deaths, on the safety of society, the fact that it's empowered organised crime, it's made organised crime into this sort of extreme threat to democracy and security. So, I mean, I've done that for a long time, but about 3.5 years ago, I had a long conversation with a colleague of mine from Health Poverty Action, Clemmy James, and she's a brilliant woman. We were sort of comparing notes about this intersection, about how no one was really exploring it adequately. Now, Clemmy's got a fascinating background because she, as a student, was an environmental activist. And she was actually part of a group of students who hijacked a coal train. She actually hijacked a coal train. But she got arrested doing it. So she was potentially faced with a long time in prison because the British government was really going after her and her colleagues. And she was in an awful, state, facing prison, going to Crown Court, when the trial collapsed. And the reason it collapsed is because one of her environmental activist team, was an undercover police officer. And so the reason she wanted to come and talk to me and have a long conversation was she wanted to understand how this undercover policing worked. And, we really became good friends. But it also meant that we could compare notes because she's got great knowledge from the environmental side of things. She's moved from that into drug policy. She understands a lot of it. And we were able to compare notes and talk about how organised crime was effectively preventing action, effectively making treaties mean nothing because of the corruption. And so we'd realised that, well, no one else was actually working on this. We had to do it ourselves. And so we formed a coalition, and it's a bit of a mouthful. Maybe we need to work on the organisational name, but it's the International Coalition of Drug Policy Reform and Environmental Justice. So we started with just a handful of people, and we sort of found the academics in the world that had done some work on this, both from the United States, from Latin America. We've got people from all over the world, effectively. And we approached this in a multidisciplinary way. We knew from the outset that if we needed to successfully argue that this was one and the same problem, that this was overlapping, that drug policy was genuinely interfering with saving the planet, that we would need to be able to look at it from many angles. So we've got a professor of geography, we've got activists and land defenders in Latin America, we've got all sorts of different disciplines from academia. And so that's what we did. And Clemmy's done incredible work pulling all of these people together. We've got over 100 people. We published one report a couple of years ago, which is called The Missing Link. And I would imagine that this podcast will actually come out after our second report, which is being published on the 30th of October 2025. And that's called From Forest to Dust. And that there is some extraordinary evidence in there about the extent of the value of the businesses concerned and how they effectively corrupt the system. So that's how I got involved. That's why I'm now putting a lot of time and energy into speaking where I'm invited. Thank you again for inviting me. And the political advocacy and just trying to find people who will listen, because hopefully by the end of this podcast, people will agree that a lot of this is actually common sense once it's explained. It just needs to be explained, and like so many things within drug policy, we can win the argument because the evidence is on our side, but you've just got to get people to listen. So to every single person out there listening or watching this right now, thank you. You're appreciated.
Yeah, and I think this connection between climate justice and drug policy is perhaps for a lot of people a very alien thought. Like, what does those two things have to do with each other at all? I know for me, at least, you came to Norway a couple of years ago, and you talked about this issue, and that was the first time I'd ever heard about it. Yeah. And I care both about climate and about drug policy. So I think, I think it's very important that we talk about these two things as the same thing.
Yeah. Okay, well, I mean, the coalition looks at, there are actually multiple points in how the two topics overlap, but in the last few months, what I've come to do is to look at this through the lens of systems. And I think it was helpful last night at the event because people seem to be getting it by me explaining it in those terms. And what I mean by that is, one of my historic heroes is Donella Meadows, sometimes referred to as Dana Meadows. And what she did, she was the first person who actually drew attention to the fact that the Earth has limited resources. And she published this book in 1972, completely shocked the political world, and she did tours of universities and various places that would host her. But people didn't want to listen. And, if we'd actually listened to her in 1972, we probably wouldn't be we wouldn't be in the same problem we are with the climate crisis. And so one of the reasons I talk about her is because she's a hero of mine, but she's also a hero of many people in the environmental sector specifically. She also, around 1990, gave us the thinking tools and the tools to actually deal with the problem we have, because she published this book about thinking in systems and designing policy in systems. And then in 1999, she did this amazing essay, which is about leverage points within those systems. Now, in a way, systematic thinking, or systems thinking, more to the point, is actually quite straightforward. It's just paying attention that if you do something with one policy, it has a knock-on effect to something else. And you have to be thinking about the whole when you design what you need to achieve. That's probably an oversimplified summary of it. But her thinking, which is championed by the environmental movement, it really is the way to understand this. And in her 1999 essay, she made the point that where there are regulations and punishments, look to who benefits from those to understand the system. Now, prohibition is not so much a leverage point, but a cancer in the middle of all of those systems. It overlaps with everything. It corrupts everything. Everything that you want to achieve within policy, health, public health, criminal justice, climate, all of these things are affected and corrupted by prohibition. And it's corrupted in many facets, but my sort of specialism, I suppose, within the coalition is that I can talk about corruption. So I first became obsessed with corruption when I was still working undercover. Now, many times I had these hints of corruption happening. Because I was working undercover, I was working amongst organised criminals and people who were using drugs problematically, and I was working amongst extremely energetic covert cops, like really obsessive, energetic cops. And there were so many hints. But then, after I'd been working undercover about 10 years, this operation in Nottinghamshire, I got my first real strong hints that corruption was a massive problem. But I should set the scene, really, shouldn't I? So in working undercover in the UK, the kind of operations I did, as the years went on, the sort of model and structure of how I worked developed. So that by 2003, I was working for an organisation which was regional, and it was called the East Midlands Special Operations Unit. And so I would be an asset owned by them that would be provided to a different police force if they asked for an undercover operation. Now, you can only do an undercover operation if the target of that operation cannot be captured by normal policing means. They can't. Or you can prove that normal policing means have been tried and failed. So in other words, it's a real step up of tactics. Now, the constabulary or police force, which was hosting this, has to have key people put in place. You have to have a senior investigating officer, you have to have an exhibits officer, you have to have a tech officer, you have to have all of these roles, and they have to be vetted and brought together, and then it's run like a terrorist cell, because this little team is run from a secret location. It's not from a police station, from a secret location. And the day before the undercover operative arrives, they're all sat down and they're given a lawful order. Now, a lawful order in British policing is a big deal. It doesn't happen very often. It means if you break this order, you could be disciplined or sacked, or both, even have your pension taken away. It's really serious. And they're all sat down and they have to sign receipt of this order. And the order was, you must not ask the undercover operative their name, their real name. You must not ask any personal details about the undercover operative at all. Which is an incredibly lonely place to step into. When I go there the next day and I arrive and I say, hi, yeah, good to meet you, my name's whatever my false name is. It's a lonely place because they're looking at me bright-eyed and large pupils like, who is this guy? I'm not allowed to ask him. You know, it's awfully lonely. And I was using the same pseudonym with these cops as I was with the people on the street and the gangsters. But that sounds quite elaborate, right? All of that planning.
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, very elaborate. But that was all designed to protect me, my safety. Because if organised crime found me, they could get to me before they were convicted. Now, this is important. And anyone watching this, please, if you remember nothing else from today, remember this. That only happens for drugs investigations. Doesn't happen for anything else because there's no risk in anything else. The corruption is specifically for drugs investigations, specifically. So I should have, with all that system in place to protect me, maybe I should have been more prepared for when I actually started to witness actual corruption. So what I used to do in terms of tactics.
But can I ask you about that? Did you at that point, did you reflect on why all those things were put in place for drug policy, for drug investigations specifically at that time? Or did that come as like a realization after?
Yeah, I mean, I've sometimes thought about this because I certainly found it unsettling. Because you know, being in that situation, told that that's the system to protect you, that's unsettling, right? It's like, oh, so there's a risk then. You know, always emphasising the risk to me, which when you need to relax and step into an undercover operation, you need to relax and that's not relaxing. So yeah, I remember actually thinking, I've got to sort of get that stress away from me before I do the work. But I didn't really give it much sort of thought about the cause and effect. I was always pushing that to one side because I was always focused on the operation. I think recently I've been realizing that there's a strong neurodivergence in me. I think I think I have some flavor of ADHD because I can be very, very driven and obsessive. And in the past, I've had inclination to have the blinkers on as well, just the job that's in front of me. Do that intensely, So maybe that's one of the reasons. But when I went into that operation in Nottinghamshire, so what I would do as a strategy is I would look for the most vulnerable people in the streets, the most vulnerable, problematic heroin or crack cocaine user, to manipulate them. And the reason I would look for the most vulnerable is because they're the easiest to manipulate. Now, if that seems ruthless, well, of course it's ruthless. It's ruthless. That's the nature of undercover policing. It's ruthless. So this young man I got to know called Cammy, he was great fun, to be honest. He was really smart. He had this sort of really great observational wit. He was good company. I liked him. And I spent weeks befriending him and manipulating him because he was on bail for dealing heroin, connected to the gang that was the main target of the operation. And just to give you a bit more background about that operation, before I went there was open warfare on Nottingham streets. It was hitting the newspapers every day. There were daily shootings, and it was between basically warfare between the Bestwood cartel, a gang called the Bestwood cartel, and everyone else. And it got to the point where it was actually on the main news and on the TV, all these shootings. And I think my favourite headline at the time was Shottingham, which is a good pun, right?
Yeah.
It was a good pun. So that was the background. But he was actually on the periphery of that main gang, the Bestwood cartel. So he was useful to me. And my idea was to get him to introduce me further up the chain. But then after a few weeks, he got arrested. And the trouble, he was on bail. Now, in the UK, if you're on bail already, that means that you might get remanded in custody to prison rather than get bail again. And I thought, there's no chance he's getting bail. So I was quite fed up, thinking, I'm going to have to work on someone else now. It's going to take me weeks to get to that level. But then I was stood in the street, actually in the town of Mansfield, talking to two of his friends, and I could see Cammy coming towards us, and I thought, how the hell has he got bail? And I could see his two mates, and they looked as suspicious as I did, because there's only one way you're going to get bail. Anyway, he came up to us looking quite scared, and he says, oh, you never guess what's happened to me. I says, what? And he said, well, the two detectives came into my cell, like they always do, wanting me to give them information, right? So I could get bail or, get a reduced sentence, whatever. And then one of them said to me, you can either give us some information or we'll let everybody know that you did. And I'm thinking, wow, from a policing point of view, I'm thinking, that's really low. That is a really scummy thing to do. So I said to him, what did you say? And he looked at me in the eye, looking genuinely scared, and said, well, I couldn't tell them anything, could I? Because they might be working for the same person I work for. And that was, it was a real eye-opening moment for me, because
that was like one of the first times you heard someone's like put those dots together like that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I always had hints of corruption and, certain people getting away at the wrong time, little things that give you doubt. But this is really tangible. This is really, because the conclusion I could come to is that, that there are corrupt cops that he's scared of, or that he's certainly convinced that there are, and either way, it's pretty grim, right? So anyway, I didn't think too much more about it. The job went well. I got him to introduce me to a lieutenant of this gangster, and this guy turned up to sell to me, and he brought his 12-year-old son with him. which is really weird, just bringing your child to work day or something. And he dressed his son in exactly the same outfit he was wearing. The same matching two-piece tracksuit, the same gold chain, the same shaved head, the same Nike Air Max trainers, this season's trainers, of course. It was weird. But then he proceeded to impress his son by interrogating me with a knife pressed into my groin, which is unsettling, to say the least.
Yeah.
Anyway, eventually, it felt like a very long time, but it was probably only about 5 minutes interrogating me with that cold steel pressed into my bollocks. Eventually, he sold the drugs to me.
Was it a large quantity because he was like interrogating you like that, or was that something he would do to a lot of people, you think?
Well, I mean, the problem is, as soon as you start getting undercover cops on the street, they know, which means it suddenly becomes more dangerous, and not just more dangerous for me, and more dangerous for everybody. That's the sort of ramping up of the arms race, right? Organised crime will always react to a tactic of the police. And the tactic for me meant that knife in my nuts. But it wasn't a large quantity. It was only something like a Henry, something like that, which is, so I'm using slang, British slang. A Henry is Henry VIII. Okay. Which is an eighth of an ounce, which is 3.5 grams.
Okay.
Sorry. It's classic. It's good slang, that, isn't it? It's very British, British slang. A Henry.
Very high cultured.
Yeah, cultured. Yeah, exactly. Some historic knowledge going on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I think it was a Henry. So I bought that. Went back to the secret location, did the debrief. Did the evidence. And then, but the thing is, I'd already made arrangements to meet somebody else the morning after. So this was a really late night finish and a really early morning start. So in the morning, I'm still fired up from what had happened to me. I'm still riding the adrenaline. The cortisol hadn't really swamped me yet. I was still like really hyper, which meant I was still as sensitive to people's behaviours and body language, things like that. And I had a shock that next morning, because there was 2 new police officers in the building in the secret location. And I thought, obviously plain clothes, but I knew they were cops. I thought, what the hell's going on here? So it was explained to me that 2 of the backup team had gone off sick, or 2 of the team anyway, and we needed 2 replacements. And I thought, nah, that's not how we do these things. Anyway, I met one, shook his hand, looked him in the eye, I had no problem with it. Shook the next one's hand, and the hairs just went up on the back of my neck. This guy was shifty. I just knew he was wrong. I knew instinctively this guy was wrong. And I was running on adrenaline to the point where I was going to trust my instincts. That was it. The secret of survival is sometimes trusting your own instincts. There's no negotiating with that. So I went to the senior investigating officer, the boss, and I said, look, boss, there is no way I'm going out on the streets today knowing that guy knows what I'm doing. I'm just not doing it. So he said, yeah, okay, fine, no problem. This shouldn't have happened anyway. It's a breach of the rules. But they don't know why they're here. They've not had the briefing. So we can get rid of them without any problem. I was reassured. I thought, great, the boss has listened to me, which was actually a moment of trust between me and him. That was a moment where I thought, okay, he's listened to me. I can trust him. I didn't think anything more about it. And this was about 4.5 months into the job. The job ended, about 56 people arrested. Then 12 months later, Colin Gunn, the gangster, was arrested in a separate operation, huge operation by Nottinghamshire Constabulary. And it turned out that the police officer I'd taken exception to was an employee of Colin Gunn. But he wasn't corrupted while he was in the police. He was paid to join the police. And he was paid £2,000 a month on top of his police wages, plus bonuses for good information. And if anyone wants to look him up, his name was Charlie Fletcher. It's all a matter of public record. He was sentenced to 7 years, which was 1 year for every year he'd been in the police. Now, in the aftermath of that, there was lots of debriefs, and I spoke to a very senior covert police officer who said to me, look, Woodsy, we know this happens. Of course this happens. with this much money involved, how can it not happen? And that was the attitude of this police leader. And I've spoken about this with police all over the world. And police leaders are privy to information where they know the extent of the threat of corruption. They know. And there is even a blasé approach that, there's nothing we can do about it. We put the safeguards that we can in place. Obviously, there was lots of safeguards for me, but it didn't work, did it?
But do you think in that situation, do you think it was actually just like the two officers, they were out sick and they just, for some reason, they brought in those two new officers, or one of them were an employee of this gangster, and he was just like, that guy almost had like a lucky break to get like a huge lead for the organized criminals? Or do you think it was like more sinister? He was almost like put up to...
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that Charlie Fletcher was instructed to get into CID.
And that is the undercover...
That was the corrupt cop. So we know that he was instructed to join, when he was joined, to try and get into CID. And he was well on the way because he was working in like a crime task group. So in other words, he had placed himself where he was likely to be able to get into those scenarios. So he'd strategically got himself in those places. But if there was more structure to that happening, who knows? Because actually the start of that operation, and this was interesting because within that system where you're like a terrorist cell, what's controlled is the flow of information as well. So if there is some intelligence which comes into the normal conventional policing, I'm not told that until there's been a discussion between the senior investigating officer and the intelligence officer to decide what information should come in, and then it's also sanitized what information should come out. So there's like a buffer zone, a firewall. And I was told some intelligence near the start of that operation, and this fascinates me because they will have had to discuss this, that whether it was worthwhile me knowing or not. And what they told me was that Colin Gunn was letting everybody know on the streets that if he caught an undercover cop, he'd have him snatched off the streets into the back of a van and tortured to death. And they told me that intelligence. So I just found this really funny at the time, because that they'd sat down, the two of them, like, right, okay, what are the benefits of telling him this? Yes, we think we should tell him this. So they must have had that discussion, because they sat down really solemnly in the briefing and said, right, we've had a piece of intelligence, and it is that he's going to... So I'm thinking, oh, thanks for that.
Maybe just like, I don't know, do you think it's like morals, like you should know like threats to you?
I mean, to be fair, I would rather have known than not.
Okay.
But I still found it funny.
Yeah.
That they must have agonised over that.
Yeah.
But that sets the scene, right? That there was an awareness of the presence of undercovers. So, Charlie Fletcher would have been wanting to try and get close to these kind of operations. So who knows? Who knows what I don't know?
Yeah, they could have had, if he did come into the operation, that would probably have had like quite different outcomes, especially for you personally, I would imagine. I mean, maybe you would not even be here.
Yeah, there'd be. Yeah, I mean, according to what we know about Gunn, who murdered people, we know he was a murderer. We know he was letting people know that he wanted to torture a cop to death. He was very arrogant with his reputation. So yeah, I'd probably be dead. Yeah, if I hadn't spotted him. To be fair. So it's thank you, adrenaline and instincts.
Yeah. So how come you were emphasizing earlier that these protections in place, it's only for drug investigations that you have the precautions to take care of the officers in that way. So like why is the drug investigations so special and different from any other type of investigation that the police is doing?
Well, it's like the senior cop said, with this much money involved, how can this not happen? So the presence of corrupt assets within policing and elsewhere is only because of drug prohibition. It's not because of anything else. And that's because there isn't enough money in any other kind of crime. There isn't enough laptops in the world that you could steal that could pay for that kind of corruption. there aren't enough houses, the value in houses to steal from, to pay for that kind of corruption. The only crime that can pay for that kind of corruption is drug crime. Seriously. And that's really important for people to realise the scale of this problem. And that's where we're beginning to get on the journey towards understanding the link between the climate crisis and drug prohibition. But let me just explain, maybe it'd be helpful if I explain a little bit more about how policing impacts, or rather doesn't impact, the drug market.
Yeah.
So the next operation I did was a few months later, and I'd given up undercover work for a while because that young man who I manipulated ended up being suicidal because of my betrayal of him, which was emotionally really difficult for me. I can still remember that feeling in my stomach when I heard that. It was really, really difficult. So I gave up the work, but then the guy from MSU said to me, "Look, Woodsy, we need you to do this job because these gangsters are even worse than the last." And he manipulated me really by saying, "Look, they'd already had 2 undercover operatives try and get close to them, and they'd not managed it." So by that stage, quite often I was like a troubleshooter. And they showed me the intelligence. So this gang called the Burger Bar Boys, a few months before they'd committed this very high-profile murder, which was all over the news in the UK, of 2 young women in Birmingham who'd been machine gunned to death. They were called Charmaine Harris and Letitia Shakespeare. And the main target of the operation was implicated in 7 other murders. So these were a significant organised crime group. So I felt duty bound, really. I had to try and do it. And so I spent then 7 months gathering evidence of conspiracy against this gang. It took a good few weeks to get introduced to them. I again manipulated some vulnerable people to do that. And at no point in their company did I feel safe. They were extraordinarily unpleasant. They really were. One day, I'd actually been wearing a video camera, but I decided to take it off one day because I thought they'd been looking at me suspiciously the day before. Again, instincts.
Yeah.
I'm really glad I had that instinct because I turned up to meet them and they bundled me into the back of a van, took me to a semi-secluded spot, and then told me to strip. I thought, "Are you joking, aren't you?" Then one of them lifted up a T-shirt and showed me a gun tucked into the top of the tracksuit bottoms. And in moments like that, scary moments, I used to have the weirdest thoughts because he was saying, "You're 5'0", man. You're heat. You're 5'0". Strip. You're wearing a wire."
Yeah.
The first thing I thought was, "You're not old enough to have seen Hawaii 5'0". And then when the guy showed me his gun, I thought, how on earth are those tracksuit bottoms holding that gun up? Because that gun's really heavy. It's weird, right? It's just the things that come into your mind.
Yeah.
Anyway, I do. It was terrifying, but I do remember feeling quite smug that I hadn't worn the camera.
Yeah.
Because 2 days before I'd worn a camera.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I survived that, and I got to the end of it, but by the end of the 7 months, when we'd finished gathering all of the evidence, and I knew there was no one else to get. There was no names I hadn't already met. There was no phone numbers I hadn't already sorted out. And I'd developed quite a dislike for these people, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Right? And I remember in the secret location looking at all the whiteboards. And if you've ever seen a TV drama where you've got all like the photographs and the lines between them and all the names, it's exactly like that. It is, honestly, it's just like that. And I'm looking at all this. Sorry, nudging the camera there. I'm looking at all this thinking, wow, this is just going to sweep the town clean. We'd got evidence against 96 people. Caught everyone. And so because there were so many people involved, we had police from 5 different counties, hundreds of cops involved in the arrest phase. And the intel guy from the operation was tasked with keeping his ear to the ground as to the impact. And I remember when he spoke to me, he says, "Yeah, we managed to interrupt the drug supply for a full 2 hours." Which it's just an extraordinary example of futility, right? All of that effort, thinking I was going to die on multiple occasions, all of that effort, the resources. And, within 2 hours, people had a new phone number, another gang had moved in. And that gang would have been really happy at what the cops had done.
Yeah, opportunity.
Yay! They'd have been really...
I almost knocked the camera over as well.
But yeah, yay, opportunity. That's, you're always going to upset one gang and make another one very happy, or another two very happy, who have a good fight over who's going to take up that opportunity. And that is actually the net result of what happens. You create a big gap like that, then two or more actors will fight over it. That's what happens. And it happens everywhere, all over the world. You can't have a police officer in Norway saying, "Oh no, we're too civilised in Norway. That doesn't happen here." Bullshit. It happens everywhere. We know it does. It's the nature of the prohibition drug market. So futility and the waste of resources is bad enough. But the fact that violence also goes up. And where violence doesn't go up, consumption increases. Why does consumption increase? Well, because gangs will compete with price cuts. You'll get a gang that come in and do bug-offs. Do you know?
No, I don't.
Buy one, get one free.
Yeah.
Bug-off. Buy 2-for-1 deals.
Yeah.
And so consumption goes up. The net effect of police activity. But those things are true. And in fact, actually, you also get overdoses go up as well because the market's disrupted. But those are not the most important things. They're important, but they're not the most important things. What also increases is corruption. Now, this needs a bit of talking through, so bear with me. If the police catch a gang or a kingpin character, however you want to paint the picture, who controls a quarter of the heroin supply, say, in a city, then that creates a gap in the market, as we've said, and that's often fought over. But the gang or kingpin character that is most able to take advantage of that opportunity is someone who controls another quarter of the city because they've got the resources already, so they can expand their operation. So what the policing is doing over time is creating monopolies. It's creating a situation where people have an increased share of the market, or they decide to form a cooperative, so they become bigger by becoming a bigger gang. And that happens at every level. It happens at city level, national level, regional level, international level. It happens. And it's been happening for decades. We have been refining the effectiveness of organised crime. We've been creating more effective monopolies, cooperatives. Efficiency, we're creating efficiency. And if someone increases their share of the market, it means they've got more income, which means they've got more disposable income. And when organised crime have more disposable income, they always, and I mean always, invest it in corruption. So if you just walk that back, the police have a success, means that they've made a certain part of organised crime more effective, they've got more money, corruption increases. And that has been the effect year after year for a very long time. But we've got to the point now where that refining efficiency of almost a corporate level organised crime now, transnational organised crime, it means that 20 years ago a corrupt asset would have been a customs official, nowadays is an entire nation or a nation's regional governance. Because it's much more cost effective to capture the boss rather than a customs official. It's much more cost effective. And that's what's happened. So now we have, around the world, narco states. And examples of those in West Africa, where you get the cocaine smuggling routes from Latin America into West Africa, where it's then distributed from West Africa to Southeast Asia, to some parts of Europe, all over the place. It means that Guinea-Bissau, Senegal, to a certain degree Ghana, narco states. They're corrupted completely. Now, what that means is that once you have that blanket corruption, you can do what you want. You can do what you want. I'll try and give you an example of.
Yeah.
Sorry, did you have a question now?
Yeah.
So, various crime monitoring agencies around the world note that organised crime routinely reinvests the money from the drug markets into other forms of criminality. Another way of saying that is that the drug market is the investment bank for the other things that organised crime do. So if you were to regulate all of the drug trade and take that money away from organised crime, you cripple organised crime twice, because you take their main business away, but you also remove their ability to reinvest because you've taken their money away. Now, we all know, that billionaires get richer without having to do any work because their money's earning money when they sleep, right? If you've got money, you make more money. It's the easiest way to make money is have it. It's the same with organised crime. If you take their investment to bank away, they can't commit certain other crimes.
So here's my question. How come the drug trade is the investment bank? How come it isn't? Because yesterday we talked about, we especially put the focus on the Amazon region, and there's a lot of illicit activities going on in the rainforests, for instance, like illegal logging, illegal gold mining. Why isn't one of those the investment bank that they use for cocaine cultivation, for instance? Why is it that way and not the other way around? That's
a really important question, because the opposition to what I'm saying, the opposition to what the coalition is saying, they don't like us to separate these illicit economies. They like to say that gangsters do all of these bad things, and that's just the way things are. If you took the drug market away from them, they'd still be doing all these bad things. It wouldn't make any difference. But that's really not true, and that's an important question that you've just asked. So, illegal mining is happening, but there isn't enough money, even in illegal gold mining, to capture an entire nation, to corrupt all of the customs officials in an entire nation, to have that dominance and the sort of paramilitary power that the drug market brings. Because there isn't enough money in it, but there is enough money in the drug market. These countries that I've talked about, they're called narco states. They're not gold mining states. They're not illegal fishing states. They're not illegal logging. So the flow of money is only going in that direction because that's the money that can capture the corrupt assets. That's the money that can capture complete governments. If you bear in mind that collectively, the Mexican cartels alone, and that's without talking about the Colombian cartels, the Gulf cartels, the Brazilian cartels, so without talking about them, just the Mexican cartels have a bigger GDP than most West African countries.
Wow.
Bigger than their nation state. That's the values that we're talking in terms of the drug market.
That's such a massive amount of money.
It's astronomical. So taken together, and the cocaine trade is a very big chunk of this, taken together, the drug markets are the 4th or 5th biggest business in the world. Bigger than textiles. Now, just try and get your head around how big that is, because not only is it that big a business, it's the only one that's unregulated and untaxed, and where we have no control of where the money flows. No control at all. You've got control of other businesses because you've got regulatory systems, so you can monitor exactly where that wealth goes, or to the most part. But you can't with the drug market, so that's an extraordinary amount of power. Now, once you have captured those corrupt assets, that means that you can reinvest your money and increase your wealth even further. Like the billionaires that's often talked about politically, you can reinvest it and make it bigger and bigger. And what organised crime do is they reinvest it into illegal gold mining. But because they've got that investment bank, it means you can invest in the equipment. It means you can invest in the transport and everything you need to make that illegal business work. For the logging, you can invest in the equipment. You can invest in the making of the land strips. You can make a government build a road for you, like Brazil's done. They build a road just for the trafficking of cocaine and logging. It was paid for by the government.
But the government can't. Do they know that they're?
No, most of them didn't. It was under the Bolsonaro regime. There's a road; it doesn't go anywhere, and the official line it was to expand tourism. there's no one going anywhere along this road except cocaine and logs. And it was paid for by the government, but that was the corrupt influence of organised crime. So once you have this blanket corruption, you can do anything. So not only are they routinely reinvesting in things like that, but once you've got that corruption, it not only allows you to commit those crimes, it also allows you to commit those crimes much more cheaply, because you've got all the corrupt assets to make sure that there's no friction at the borders.
Yeah, nothing really stops you.
No, nothing stops you because it's already paid for. You've already covered all that. It's complete corruption. And the added advantage as well is that organised crime can also use these other criminal activities to launder the money. So logging is so useful to them because they can launder the money so easily. Because one log, when it gets to a certain part of the market, there's no one saying where that's from. Albanian drug gangs have bought the wood trading companies in Ecuador. It's just one clue amongst many, many clues of what's going on here. And we're looking at the destruction of Ecuador into a narco state almost on a weekly basis. Organised crime have decided to take over Ecuador. And bit by bit, it's happening.
But how on earth can there be so much money involved in drugs? We know at least like on the street level, cocaine, for instance, in Norway, I think the price is like between 800 or 1,000 kroner, which is like, what, I don't know, like a bit more than 80 to 100 euro, maybe, or something per gram. It's a bit, but it's not so much. How can they earn so much money that they have more money than like actual states?
Well, because of prohibition. Because prohibition artificially inflates the price, and it's uncontrolled, it's unregulated. So the value of these products is artificially raised because of the risk element, and it suits organised crime for policing to be intense. It keeps the prices high. I mean, the prices are dropping now actually for cocaine. It's a complicated situation with cocaine at the moment. It's very complicated. Now, I know I've spoken to a few people here since I've been in Norway, and you're quoting me these prices. I don't believe those prices are so high, because at the moment you can get a gram of cocaine, which is almost 100% pure, in the UK for £40.
Yeah.
And you can get that from the dark web. And the dark web delivers as much in Norway as it does in the UK. So it's not everyone that's paying twice that in Norway, I guarantee it.
Probably not. Maybe not.
And we're going through a period of flux with it as well. So in the last measurable 12 months, the cocaine supply internationally has gone up 35%. The wholesale price of the coca leaf is down 70%. Now, that's not a market which has been affected by police seizures at all. But it's a complicated situation, but it's like the market is both responding to demand, because demand is high, it's climbing in Europe, Southeast Asia and elsewhere. But it's also, because of this abundance of supply, it's also going to stimulate demand because the price is dropping. So, this increase in the use of cocaine isn't slowing down anytime soon. So the impact that the cocaine trade has, and its intersection with the climate crisis, it's urgent for us to be talking about this, because this is it's out of our controls anyway, but it's becoming more so. The situation is getting worse, significantly worse. And with the Trump administration, various people wanting to increase the military response, like more security, more policing, arrest more people, seize more drugs. That's just accelerating the problem, because if you seize like sometimes happens in the EU, some ridiculous quantity of cocaine, like 100 kilos or whatever, there's always a new record, isn't there? If that 100 kilos is seized, it just means another one's sent out, because the supply is so high. And the profit's so enormous that if a delivery is seized by police or customs or whatever, they just send another one out. They don't charge them. They just write it off. So it's not even affecting organised crime at all. They are already considering these just business losses. But if you seize 100 kilos, that means there's another 100 kilos is being manufactured. So all you're doing with these seizures is speeding up the problem. And where coca crops are being aerial sprayed or destroyed, it just means that there's another coca plantation is going to happen even deeper in the rainforest.
Yeah.
It just means more rainforest destroyed. Every time you seize a coca plantation, that means more forest destroyed because it'll be replaced immediately. Because the size of the market, and this is always important, the size of the market remains the same. You know, we have police officers celebrate, well, look, all these street drugs we've seized, that means we've done a great job. Well, yeah, I mean, you might have done a great job in capturing these people and seizing those drugs, but it's had no impact. No positive impact. It's had negative impacts because there will just be more cocaine produced. This is accelerating. This is accelerating the destruction of the rainforest, both by the displacement of the coca fields, but also the acceleration of this system of corruption. Now, this is something that I like to try and explain where I can, is that we should be looking at this from a sort of economic and business perspective. Right? Now, when your senior police do a big seizure or they do an arrest or they arrest a gang or whatever, do they ever use the sort of, and I don't know the translation because I don't speak Norwegian, but do they use a phrase like, we have disrupted organised crime, or we have to disrupt organised crime?
Yeah, they do. They do. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting when you say that because disruption is not reduction, is it?
No.
And it's almost like an admission that what we're doing is not actually reducing the size of the market, because they're not. It's almost like they're admitting it.
Yeah.
But they will say, we have a duty to disrupt the activities of organised crime. And they say this and they repeat this. They say this a lot in the UK and around the world. But if you were to do a business course, a business degree of some kind, early on in your business education, you would have a lecture that would be about creating market opportunities and how do you create market growth. And the secret to creating market opportunities and market growth is disrupting that market. This is business doctrine. So when senior police officers are in front of that TV camera saying, we have a duty to disrupt the activities of organised crime,
It's just making it more profitable.
they are unironically saying that we have created market growth. Because it's a market.
Yeah.
It's not, they're talking in terms of disruption like they're trying to disrupt an insurgency or terrorists or something. No, this is a marketplace. And the market hasn't shrunk. It's actually growing. So would we have the mess now of the awful impacts of prohibition around the world and to the planet if, when drugs were banned many decades ago, we decided not to bother policing it? Now, it's an interesting thought concept, this. Would the market be as big? I'd argue no, because we wouldn't have been disrupting it to create market growth. We wouldn't have been. If you'd ignored the laws, we wouldn't have had the increase in the value of the commodity because we were making it more risky. So therefore, the profits wouldn't have been as big. It wouldn't have attracted quite the same interest from organised crime, and we wouldn't have been constantly disrupting the market, creating market growth and finding new customers. Just the thought process. Thought.
It's a fascinating. It's a fascinating idea. What do you think would happen if we just collectively worldwide decided to stop policing drugs now? Well, with these actors already being huge.
Well, yeah. I mean, to a degree, the genie's out of the bottle, right? The Pandora's box is open. But what you've just said is really important, because we have to face facts. That drug prohibition has not just been a disaster for our security and for the violence in our society, for drug deaths, for all of those reasons. It's also a disaster for the planet. Because the COP next month is going to be in Medlem, which is the second busiest cocaine smuggling port. It's in Brazil. And the COP's there, the coalition to which I'm a part is going to be there. And the question is, we need to take this seriously, and we need to decide what we're going to do about it. Now, sometimes I'll speak to an audience and I'll say, look, we've only got two choices here. We can either get organised crime around the table and invite them to change their practices and stop reinvesting the money from cocaine into logging for the sake of their grandchildren. We could do that. We could play the diplomat, which would involve what you just suggested. It would involve stopping policing them. So we could come to an agreement like that, or we take their business off them and fully legally regulate overnight. We've got, those are the two choices. These are stark choices. This is catastrophic. This is genuinely catastrophic, what we're talking about here, because all of the world leaders will go, all the health ministers, the environment ministers, the people who are relevant will be going to the COP, and they will be signing the new deforestation treaty. They signed one at the last COP and the COP before. They'll come to new agreements, but those signatures mean nothing if you don't control your own backyard. And the journalists will be celebrating the success of a new agreement. But that agreement means nothing in Brazil, where regional governance is corrupted. It'll mean nothing in Honduras as a narco state. It'll mean nothing in Ecuador, where they've lost control.
Oh. So you're saying that even though like the politicians, they want to do something about it, they're prohibited because they don't actually even control the areas?
Because those areas are corrupted. The mafia controls the Amazon. And it's not mafia signing the treaty.
So it's as you're saying that you'd have to invite the cartels in a way in order to get them to sign it. And
I'll be honest though, I don't know the solution.
Yeah.
I'm saying these things because we have to get this conversation going to say, what are we going to do about this? I don't have all the answers, but at the moment it's looking quite binary. Either we talk to the criminals and do something that's harm reduction, or we commit to legal regulation. Or maybe we do both. Maybe we look at how we politically win people over to realise that we need legal regulation. We need to be working on that advocacy bit. In the meantime, what does harm reduction look like in the cocaine trade? How do we mitigate these problems? How do we slow this down? How do we do it? How do we do this? There is some examples. So in Colombia, the current president has been brilliant on this topic. And I think in 2022, he actually did a speech which said, what has caused the most damage to the world, cocaine or oil? He was spelling it out quite clearly that cocaine is not the demon that people are making out, and that for the sake of the planet, we need to be taking this seriously. Now, the Colombians have got a history of negotiating with who they consider criminals. They negotiated a peace deal with the FARC. They're talking now about talking with elements of organised crime as the only pragmatic response to the environmental destruction. We have to be also considering this in the global north, and I'll tell you why. Because from the coalition of which I'm a member, sometimes I feel a little bit uncomfortable as someone from the global north in a privileged position talking about what should happen in the global south, because it should be indigenous people deciding what should happen. Any future regulatory system should be designed by those people most affected by the current crisis. But we have worked out over the last few years within the coalition that we in the global north who are members we have a responsibility because many of our members in the Global South say, well, I can't speak out about this because if I do, I will be murdered. And this is the reality. This is the security risks. Our membership in the Global South, our membership in Latin America, cannot even speak about this because organised crime, organised crime, will kill them if they do.
Because they feel threatened that their market will be
exactly
taken away from them.
Yeah, exactly. Organised crime do not want legal regulation. And politicians don't want legal regulation. This is an uncomfortable situation where we have politicians who staunchly defend prohibition find themselves on the same side as drugs organised crime, who also don't want an end to prohibition.
Yeah, I don't think they realize, but to quite a large extent, they're doing organised crime more service than they're doing like the actual people or the rainforest or whatever else that they're claiming that they want to defend.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's really upsetting, so it's important that we talk about it. I was wondering, you've been quite vocal about these issues like the last years. Have you faced any like threats or anything being an advocate for this, being like a person living here in the global north?
I mean, it's funny, I get all sorts of correspondence because I do a lot of social media. Some videos which have a few million views, like for Vice or Insider or whatever it might be, means that I get contacted by people from all over the world. And I've had some very friendly interactions with people from the other side who are just trying to make a living. I have. And, you know, I'm quite guilty of stigmatizing drug dealers because it's not fair, because most drug dealers are just perfectly nice people, right? They're just stuck in that situation. But I have had hints of warnings. I've had someone say to me, look, you know, you get to a few more million views talking about this, you're going to get murdered. And that's been said to me a few times. I mean, I can't, you know, none of us, you're the same, you'll be the same as me. None of us can stop doing what we're doing because it's the right thing to do, right? And, you know, you have to face the reality that because I have quite a profile as a campaigner, if I did get murdered, at least it'd be good for the cause, right?
Well, it's good that you can see some positive with even
you've always got to see
the worst
positive
situations. Yeah. So I think we're running towards the end of the time of the like regular episode, but after this we're also recording like a Q&A. But I was wondering, for the regular episode, do you have anything else that you want to add that you're thinking about?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think that seems a reasonable place to end, really.
Yeah. Okay, well then I'll just thank you so much for joining this podcast. It was a really great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.